Marcus Wellington sat in the back seat of his black sedan, scrolling through quarterly reports on his tablet. His driver navigated the busy afternoon traffic, while Marcus reviewed profit margins and expansion proposals. At 45 years old, he owned Wellington's Market, a chain of 15 grocery stores across the state. Success had come through hard work, smart decisions, and never forgetting where he came from. Take the next exit. Marcus suddenly told his driver, "I want to stop by the Riverside location." His driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Surprised, Mr. Wellington rarely visited stores unannounced. The executive team handled day-to-day operations, while Marcus focused on bigger business strategies. But something felt different today. Maybe it was the morning conversation with his elderly mother. Or maybe it was just instinct. Either way, Marcus wanted to see one of his stores through regular eyes. 20 minutes later, the car pulled into the parking lot of Wellington's Market on Riverside Avenue. The building looked clean and well-maintained from outside. Customers pushed shopping carts toward their cars, while others headed inside. Marcus stepped out of the sedan, wearing simple jeans and a plain blue shirt. He'd left his suit jacket in the car. Today, he didn't want to be the boss. He wanted to be just another customer. The automatic glass doors slid open with a quiet whoosh. Cool, air-conditioned breeze welcomed him inside. The store smelled like fresh bread from the bakery section. Marcus grabbed a shopping basket and started walking slowly through the aisles. His eyes noticed everything. Were the shelves fully stocked? Was the floor clean? Did employees seem happy or stressed? Near the produce section, a young worker arranged apples in neat pyramids. "Good afternoon, sir," the young man said cheerfully.
"The Honeycrisp apples just came in this morning."
"Very fresh." Marcus smiled and nodded. That was good. Friendly staff made customers feel welcome. He picked up a few apples and continued browsing. In the dairy aisle, he checked expiration dates. Everything looked proper. The store seemed to be running smoothly. But then Marcus heard something that made him pause. A raised voice came from somewhere near the front registers. It wasn't a customer complaint or a crying child. It was an angry male voice, sharp and aggressive. Marcus moved toward the sound, staying behind a tall display of cereal boxes. Through a gap in the shelves, he could see the customer service desk and registers. 7 checkout lanes ran parallel to each other. Most had customers waiting in line at register 7. He noticed an older black woman wearing the store's uniform. Her name tag read Keisha Thompson. She stood frozen, her face tight with worry. A tall white man in a manager's shirt and tie stood too close to her. His finger pointing at her face. Marcus couldn't hear the exact words yet, but he could see the body language. The manager's stance was aggressive, dominating. The cashier's shoulders were pulled back, trying to maintain dignity despite obvious distress. Customers in her line looked uncomfortable. Some shifted their weight from foot to foot. Others stared at their phones, pretending not to notice. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd built this business on principles his mother taught him. Respect, fairness, treating people the way you want to be treated. His mother had worked as a cashier for 20 years, coming home exhausted every night, but always proud of her honest work. She'd raised Marcus alone after his father left, working 2 jobs to keep food on their table now. Watching this scene unfold in his own store, Marcus felt something break inside his chest. This woman could be his mother, could be anyone's mother, grandmother, sister, and she was being treated like this in a place that bore his name. He set down his shopping basket and moved closer, ready to see exactly what was happening behind his back. Marcus stepped closer to the customer service area, moving quietly so as not to draw attention. The commotion had grown louder now, and the words became painfully clear. The store manager, Derek Paulson, stood towering over Keisha, the senior cashier. His face was red with anger, and his voice carried through the aisles. "You think I don't see what's happening?" he shouted. "This isn't your first time coming up short. $20 missing again. And from your register." Keisha's hands trembled as she tried to explain. "Sir, please, I counted the drawer twice this morning. There must be a mistake in the system." Her voice was calm but edged with fear. She kept her posture straight, but her eyes betrayed the sting of humiliation. Customers nearby began to take notice. Whispering started in the lines. A few parents pulled their children aside. Others stepped closer, pretending to browse while they listened. Derek snatched the sheet of paper from the counter, waving it in her face. You expect me to believe that, huh? He sneered. You people always have an excuse. The words, you people, landed heavy and ugly in the air. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He couldn't believe he'd heard that from one of his senior managers. Still unnoticed, he stood by a display of coffee tins. Watching the scene, Derek's tone wasn't just unprofessional, it was cruel. It carried something darker, something that had no place in any workplace. Least of all his own. Keisha swallowed hard and lowered her eyes. Sir, I don't know what you mean by that. But I've never taken anything. I swear on my job and my name. You can swear all you want, Derek spat out. We're done here. I knew hiring you was a risk. Now you've proved me right. He grabbed the lanyard with her name tag and yanked it roughly off her neck. The small metal clip snapped, falling to the white-tiled floor with a soft clink that seemed to echo through the entire store. Keisha froze, her hands trembling near her sides. Her dignity fought against her tears. Her lips quivered, but she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered, You didn't even check the camera, sir, please. Just check before you accuse me. Derek turned away. Dismissive. I don't need to check anything. My instinct's enough. His smirk made Marcus's blood boil. By now, a small crowd had gathered. A couple of employees from other aisles looked anxious but didn't speak up. One young bag boy, maybe 17, whispered to his co-worker, She didn't do anything. I saw her count. The other nodded nervously, afraid to get involved. Marcus saw that fear and knew instantly, if this was happening on the floor, it meant this kind of behavior had been tolerated for too long. Keisha took a deep breath and said softly, I've worked here 3 years without one warning. So you can ask anyone, I've trained half your staff. This isn't right. But Derek wasn't listening. He had turned toward the customers and said loudly, Sorry, folks, this line is closed until we sort this out. Please move to another register. His voice dripped superiority as if humiliating her was part of his performance. Marcus could no longer stand it. Every second of silence from him felt like betrayal. His mother's face flashed in his mind. Tired after long shifts, her hands blistered from bagging groceries for strangers who never saw her worth. He felt shame burn through him. This wasn't just his store. It was his responsibility, and at that moment, he realized something worse than Derek's cruelty. The fact that no one else dared to stop him. Keisha began to gather her few personal things, a water bottle, a small frame photo of her 2 grandkids, and her folded lunch bag. Her fingers shook as she placed them into a plastic shopping bag. The floor had gone strangely quiet. Even the beeping scanners at other registers seemed to pause. Marcus stepped forward at last, his voice low but firm. Excuse me, what exactly is going on here? Derek turned, annoyed. Sir, this is an internal matter. Please move along. The casual dismissal of another customer made Marcus's jaw clench. Internal? Marcus repeated slowly. Interesting choice of word. He stepped closer until Derek could see his face clearly. Recognition dawned on the manager's features, and all the color drained out of his cheeks. The air turned heavier as the silence deepened between them. Keisha stopped packing her things and looked between them, realizing something important was about to happen. Marcus's voice stayed calm, but there was a storm behind his eyes. I'm sure we'll sort it out right here. Right now, he said quietly. Everyone in the store seemed to hold their breath. The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to feel. Derek's mouth hung open for a moment before he tried to recover. Mr. Wellington, sir, I didn't realize, I was only doing store protocol, he stammered. Sweat beading on his forehead, Keisha stood still, her eyes flicking between the 2 men. She had no idea the stranger who had just stepped in was the owner of the entire company. Marcus's expression stayed calm, but there was a weight in his voice that carried authority. Store protocol. He repeated softly, I'd like to hear exactly what that means. Derek swallowed hard, glancing nervously at the growing crowd of customers and employees now pretending to work nearby. Sir, there was a missing $20, and I was questioning the cashier about it, just making sure by yelling at her in front of customers. Marcus interrupted, his tone still cool but edged with steel. By humiliating her, by using words that sound dangerously close to racism. Derek went pale. No, sir, I'd never. I heard every word, Marcus said, cutting through his defense like a blade. You said you people, didn't you? Derek opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked trapped, like a man who finally realized there was no way out. "That's not what I meant, sir. It came out wrong," he said quickly. "I was stressed about the loss." "And she has made mistakes before." Keisha took a breath, her voice steady but hurt. "I haven't made a mistake in 3 years of working here, sir, and you know that," she said softly. Derek turned on her in panic. "Quiet! You're lucky I'm not firing you, right? Watch your tone," Marcus said sharply. The words commanded the room. Everyone froze. The background noise of the store seemed to vanish. Even the soft beep of checkout scanners fell silent. Marcus stepped closer, his presence calm but unyielding. "Do you know what I see right now, Derek?" he asked. His voice had softened again, but the anger hadn't gone away. "I see a manager who's forgotten what leadership means. Someone who thinks shouting makes him powerful." Derek's lips trembled, trying to regain control. "Mr. Wellington, sir, if I had known you were here." Marcus gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's exactly the problem. You only behave when you think someone important is watching. But it's when you think no one is watching that a person's true character shows." A couple of employees exchanged looks, knowing the truth in his words. Marcus turned toward Keisha. "Ms. Thompson, would you please tell me exactly what happened?" She hesitated before answering. "He said my register was short $20. I told him I'd checked it twice, but he wouldn't listen," she said. "He told me you people always have excuses. Then he took my badge off, in front of everyone. I didn't even get the chance to explain properly." Her voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from the injustice of it all. Marcus nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Thank you for being honest, Keisha. You don't have to say anything else." He turned back to Derek, who looked like he wished he could disappear. "You owe this woman an apology right now," Marcus said firmly. Derek blinked rapidly. "Sir, please, I just apologize," Marcus repeated. This time louder, Derek turned toward Keisha, his voice small now. I'm sorry, Miss Thompson. I shouldn't have spoken that way." Keisha looked at him with a tired expression, one that made it clear the apology meant nothing. Marcus watched quietly, then said, "You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry because you got caught." The crowd began to thin as Marcus gestured for everyone to return to their work. He didn't want to turn the store into a stage. He took Derek aside and spoke in a voice only he could hear. "You're suspended effective immediately. I'll have HR contact you regarding your future here." Derek's face drained of color completely. "Mr. Wellington, please don't do this." "I've been loyal." "Loyal to what?" Marcus asked. "To profits? To your pride?" "Because it sure wasn't to the people who work here." He turned away, his decision final, as Derek walked out of the store. The few customers left in line gave Keisha sympathetic looks. One even placed a gentle hand on her shoulder before leaving. Marcus approached her again, this time with warmth in his voice. "You handled yourself with dignity, Ms. Thompson. I'm sorry you were treated that way in my store." Keisha wiped a tear from her cheek, whispering, "Thank you, sir, I just wanted to do my job." Marcus nodded, understanding more than she realized. He thought of his mother again, her tired eyes, her quiet strength, her pride. And he knew he couldn't let this moment become just another memory. It had to mean something. It had to change something. After Derek left the store, the air felt heavy, as if everyone was still holding their breath. Marcus stood still for a moment, staring at the glass doors that had just closed behind his disgraced manager. His jaw tightened, and for a second he looked older, weighed down by disappointment, not just in Derek, but in himself. How could something like this happen under his watch? He prided himself on running a fair business, yet right here in one of his own stores, a woman had been humiliated because of her color. The thought cut deep, deeper than any business loss ever had. Keisha stood quietly by the counter, her hands still shaking slightly. Marcus looked at her and saw not weakness but quiet strength. She had stood there, insulted in front of everyone, yet never once lashed back in anger. She reminded him of someone, his mother. The image of her came flashing in his mind. She used to wear the same kind of uniform, a faded green apron from the grocery store where she'd worked her whole life. Every night she came home tired but smiling. "At least I earned it honest," she would say. The memory pulled at his heart until it hurt. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "Sir, should I finish my shift?" Keisha asked nervously. She didn't know what to do, whether she was fired, forgiven, or forgotten. Marcus turned to her and took a deep breath. "No, Ms. Thompson. You've done more than enough for today," he replied gently. "Come with me." "Please." The other employees pretended to stock shelves, but their eyes followed as Marcus guided her toward the staff office. Inside, Marcus closed the door and gestured for her to sit. He took Derek's old chair behind the desk. It felt strange, like sitting on a throne built on someone else's cruelty. "I want to understand everything that happened," he said. Keisha nodded slowly. She recounted the morning, every word, every look, the way customers avoided her eyes, and how Derek had spoken to her. When she finished, there was silence. Marcus looked at the desk for a long while before speaking. "You didn't deserve that, not one bit," he said softly. "I am sorry it happened in my store." His voice cracked just slightly at the end, the first crack in his calm since the incident started. Keisha shook her head. "So you don't need to apologize." "You didn't do it." Marcus looked at her carefully. "But I allowed it," he said. "That makes me responsible. When my company's name is written on your badge, your treatment reflects my leadership. And I failed you, Keisha." She blinked hard, trying not to cry. It wasn't every day that a powerful man spoke with humility. She managed a faint smile. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. Marcus nodded, standing up suddenly. "You should go home for today. Full pay. I'll have someone drive you." She hesitated, but finally said, "Thank you, Mr. Wellington," as she left. The automatic doors opened again. Sunlight spilled across the floor. Marcus stayed in the office for a while, staring at the employee handbook pinned to the wall. The words at the top said integrity, respect, team. He almost laughed bitterly. They were just words until someone chose to live by them. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Get HR on the line now," he said in a quiet but firm voice. "We need an internal review of every store. Starting today, every report of misconduct, bias or abuse, I want everything. No exceptions." When he hung up, he sat back in the chair, the weight in his chest growing heavier. He thought of his mother again, the way customers used to look past her like she didn't exist. At the way she'd once told him, "Success means nothing if you forget people." He swallowed hard, realizing her words had just come to life in the worst way. He had become what she once warned him about. Successful, respected, admired, but distant from the people who carried his company on their backs. The next afternoon, Marcus met with the store's senior team. He informed them of Derek's suspension and reminded them why the company existed. "We sell groceries, not pride, not prejudice," he said firmly. "If you ever see disrespect under this roof again, and you stay silent, you're just as guilty." His voice was calm but unshakable. For the first time, he saw genuine shame in their eyes later. When the store finally quieted down, Marcus walked the aisles again. He stopped at Register 7, where Keisha usually stood. The scanner's soft green light blinked quietly. He traced a hand along the counter and whispered under his breath, "Never again." His heart ached, but beneath that ache grew something stronger. Resolve. This was not the end of the story. It was the turning point. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his corporate headquarters earlier than usual. His mind had barely rested the night before. Images of Keisha's humiliated face kept replaying in his thoughts. He couldn't shake the weight of knowing that under his name, people had suffered in silence. Walking into his large office, he immediately called his chief human resources officer, Linda Ramirez. "I need to see you now," he said simply. Within minutes, she appeared at his door, confused by the urgent tone. "Linda, sit down," Marcus began, his voice steady but serious. "We have a problem." "A big one." He recounted everything that had happened at the Riverside store, sparing no detail, not Derek's cruel words, not Keisha's silent dignity, and not his own failure to notice sooner. Linda's face grew more troubled with each sentence. "Mr. Wellington, I had no idea Derek was—" Marcus raised a hand gently, stopping her. "That's the point, Linda. No one knew because no one was looking closely enough. We hire managers and trust them, but we don't have systems in place to protect our people from them." Linda nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of what he was saying. "What do you want to do, sir?" she asked. Marcus leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk. "I want a full review, every store. Every complaint ever filed, even the ones marked resolved. I want to know if there are more Dereks out there." His voice was calm but final. Linda pulled out her tablet and began taking notes. "We'll start immediately," she said. "I'll assemble a team by this afternoon," Marcus added. "And I want mandatory training, real training. Not just videos people click through. I want workshops on bias, respect and accountability led by experts, not HR reading slides." Later that afternoon, Marcus drove back to the Riverside store. This time he didn't go in disguise. He wore his suit, his confidence, and his responsibility like armor. When employees saw him walk in, whispers spread quickly. The regional director, Thomas Grant, rushed over nervously. "Mr. Wellington, we weren't expecting you again so soon." Marcus gave him a firm look. "That's exactly why I'm here." "Thomas?" He walked straight to the break room where most of the staff gathered during shift changes. He asked everyone to pause for a moment, standing in front of nearly 20 employees. Marcus spoke from the heart. "Yesterday, something happened here that should never happen anywhere. A valued member of this team was treated unfairly and disrespectfully. Some of you saw it, some of you heard about it." He paused, making eye contact with several people. "I want you to know that this company was built on fairness. My mother worked in stores like this. She raised me alone, and she taught me one thing above everything else: treat people with dignity, no matter who they are." His voice grew stronger. "What happened to Keisha Thompson was wrong, and I take full responsibility for allowing a culture where someone like Derek felt comfortable acting that way." A few employees exchanged glances. Surprised by his honesty, one young woman in the back wiped her eyes. Marcus continued, "From today forward, things will change. If you see something wrong, you report it directly to me if you have to. No one should fear speaking up, and no one should be punished for doing what's right." He handed out cards with a direct hotline number to corporate. "This line goes to an independent team, not your managers. Use it if you need to." The room was silent, but heads nodded in agreement. After the meeting, Marcus asked to speak with a few employees privately. One by one, he wanted to hear their stories, their experiences, what they'd seen but never felt safe to say. A young black man named Terrell spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Wellington, Derek wasn't always like that in front of everyone, but behind closed doors, he made comments, little things that made us uncomfortable." Marcus listened carefully, his jaw tight. "Why didn't you report it?" he asked gently. Terrell looked down. "Because we thought no one would believe us, sir." He was the manager. Marcus felt his chest tighten again. The system he'd built had failed these people. "I believe you now," Marcus said quietly, "and I'm sorry it took this long." When Terrell left, Marcus sat alone in the office for a while, staring at the wall. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Keisha, thanking him for standing up for her. He replied simply, "You stood up for yourself. I just made sure people listened." That evening, Marcus called his mother from his car. "Mom, I saw you today," he said softly. She laughed, confused. "What do you mean, baby?" He smiled through the pain. "I saw you in someone who reminded me why you worked so hard. Why you stayed kind even when people weren't." There was a long pause before she replied. "Then you did the right thing, Marcus. That's all that matters." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying." When he hung up, he felt lighter, not because the problem was solved, but because he'd finally chosen to face it. 3 days after the incident, Marcus received a call from his legal team. Derek Paulson had filed a wrongful termination complaint, claiming he was suspended without proper investigation. Marcus listened calmly, then replied with just 5 words. "Pull the security footage immediately." Within hours, the video was on his desk. He watched it alone in his office. The door locked. What he saw turned his stomach. Derek's body language, his finger pointing aggressively. The way he leaned over Keisha like a predator cornering prey. The audio captured every ugly word, every insulting tone. Marcus paused the video and sat back, his hands pressed against his face. He forwarded the footage to his legal team with a simple message. "This ends now. Proceed with termination. Full documentation." Derek's complaint was dropped by the end of the week. But Marcus knew firing one bad manager wasn't enough. The rot went deeper than one person. He needed to rebuild trust from the ground up. That same afternoon, he announced a company-wide initiative called Voices Matter. It wasn't just a catchy slogan. It was a promise. Every store would have anonymous feedback boxes, quarterly town halls, and direct access to corporate leadership. Marcus also hired an external consultant, Dr. Amara Thompson, a renowned expert in workplace equity and bias training. She wasn't there to read slides or check boxes. She was there to challenge, to ask hard questions, to make people uncomfortable in the right way. Her first session was at the Riverside store. She stood in front of the staff and said, "This training isn't about making you feel guilty. It's about making you aware of the power you hold, the assumptions you carry, and the impact you have on others." The room was silent. Some employees shifted nervously, but most leaned in, ready to listen. Dr. Thompson didn't sugarcoat anything. She talked about unconscious bias, microaggressions, and systemic inequality, not in abstract terms, but through real stories, real consequences. She showed videos of people sharing their experiences of workplace discrimination. Some stories made people tear up, others made them angry. By the end of the 2-hour session, the energy in the room had shifted. People weren't defensive anymore, they were reflective. One older white employee raised his hand and said quietly, "I think I've said things without realizing how they sounded. I want to do better." Dr. Thompson nodded. "That's the first step," acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Marcus personally reached out to Keisha. He called her at home one evening, his voice gentle. "Ms. Thompson, I know you've been through a lot. I want you to know that you have a place here for as long as you want it. But I also understand if you need time, or if you'd prefer to work at a different location." There was a long pause before Keisha spoke. "Mr. Wellington, I've been thinking about that," she said softly. "I love my job. I love the customers, the regulars who ask about my grandkids, the co-workers who feel like family. I don't want to leave, but I need to know that what happened won't happen again." Marcus took a breath. "I can't promise perfection, Keisha, but I can promise accountability, and I can promise that your voice and every voice in this company will be heard and respected." Keisha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, Mr. Wellington, I'll come back, but I'm holding you to that promise." Marcus smiled. Even though she couldn't see it, I wouldn't expect anything less. When they hung up, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope, not the naive kind, but the kind that comes from taking responsibility and committing to change. A week later, Keisha returned to work. When she walked through the doors of the Riverside store, something unexpected happened. Her co-workers stood and applauded. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet show of respect and solidarity. Keisha's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled and waved them off. All right. Let's get back to work," she said with a laugh. But everyone could see it. She stood a little taller, her shoulders a little straighter. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was a symbol of something bigger, dignity reclaimed. Marcus watched from the back of the store, his arms crossed, his heart full. He didn't announce his presence, didn't make a speech. He just watched quietly as life returned to normal, or rather, as a new normal began to take shape. Before leaving, he stopped by Keisha's register. "Welcome back, Ms. Thompson," he said simply. She looked up and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Wellington, for everything." He shook his head gently. "No, thank you, for reminding me what this company is supposed to stand for." As he walked out into the afternoon sun, Marcus knew the hardest work was still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready. 2 months had passed since the incident that shook Wellington's market to its core. The changes Marcus implemented weren't just words on paper anymore. They were becoming real, visible, felt. Every store now had monthly meetings where employees could speak openly without fear. Managers were no longer untouchable gods. They were leaders who had to earn respect through fairness, not demand it through intimidation. The shift was slow, but it was happening and people noticed. At the Riverside store, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Employees smiled more, greeted customers with genuine warmth, and looked after one another like family. Keisha had become something of a quiet hero among the staff, not because she asked for attention, but because her courage had opened doors for everyone. Young employees who once stayed silent now spoke up when something felt wrong. Older workers who'd accepted mistreatment as just the way things are began to believe change was actually possible. One afternoon, a new manager arrived at Riverside. Her name was Angela Martinez, a woman in her early 40s with a kind face and steady hands. Marcus had personally chosen her after weeks of interviews, background checks and reference calls. Angela wasn't just qualified on paper. She understood what it meant to lead with empathy. On her first day, she gathered the team in the break room. "I'm not here to rule over you," she said simply. "I'm here to work with you. If you have concerns, I want to hear them. If you see injustice, I want to fix it. Together." The room was quiet at first. People had heard promises before, but Angela's eyes held something different: sincerity. Over the following weeks, Angela proved her words with actions. When a young cashier made an honest mistake and panicked, Angela calmly walked her through the correction without raising her voice. When an older employee struggled with the new computer system, Angela sat beside him for an hour, patiently teaching until he got it. When a customer became verbally abusive toward a staff member, Angela stepped in immediately, firmly but politely asking the customer to leave. "We don't tolerate disrespect toward our team," she said without hesitation. The employees watched in quiet amazement. This was leadership they'd never experienced before. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his mission across all 15 stores. He visited each location unannounced, not to catch people doing wrong, but to listen, to learn, to understand what was really happening on the ground. At one store, he discovered a manager who'd been skipping employees' break times to save costs. Marcus didn't yell or make a scene. He simply removed the manager and implemented a digital break tracking system to ensure it never happened again. At another location, employees shared stories of being scheduled unfairly based on favoritism. Marcus introduced transparent scheduling software, where shifts were assigned based on availability and seniority. Not personal bias, the company's Voices Matter initiative began bearing fruit in unexpected ways. Anonymous feedback revealed patterns Marcus had never noticed. Several stores reported feeling uncomfortable with how certain customers treated staff, particularly women and people of color. Marcus responded by authorizing all employees to refuse service to anyone who became abusive. "You are not punching bags," he wrote in a company-wide memo. "You are professionals, and you deserve to be treated as such." The message was clear. Wellington's market would protect its people, even if it meant losing a customer. Word of Marcus's transformation spread beyond his company. Local news outlets picked up the story. Business magazines wrote features about how one CEO chose accountability over silence. Other business owners began reaching out, asking for advice on implementing similar changes. Marcus was invited to speak at a conference on workplace equity. Standing on that stage, in front of hundreds of executives, he didn't talk about profits or expansion strategies. He talked about his mother, about Keisha, about the moment his heart broke and why it needed to. "We build businesses to create value," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. "But if that value comes at the cost of someone's dignity, then we've failed, not just as leaders but as human beings." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus didn't smile. He knew applause was easy, action was hard. He hoped at least a few people in that audience would leave and actually do the work, not just talk about it back at the Riverside store. Keisha stood at her register, scanning groceries with the same quiet efficiency she always had. But now, when customers thanked her, she stood a little taller. When co-workers greeted her, she felt seen, truly seen. One evening as her shift ended, Angela approached her. "Keisha, I just want to say thank you," Angela said softly, "for standing your ground, for being brave when it mattered most." Keisha's eyes glistened, but she smiled. "I was just trying to survive," she said. Angela shook her head gently. "No, you were trying to live with dignity. There's a difference." As Keisha walked out into the cool evening air, she thought about everything that had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by something stronger, hope, real hope. She reached for her phone and called her daughter. "Baby, I'm okay," she said, her voice full of relief. "Everything's going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. 6 months after that fateful day when Marcus walked into the Riverside store, Wellington's market looked different, not just in policy but in spirit. Employees walked with their heads higher, customers felt the warmth of genuine service, and the company's reputation grew not just for good prices, But for good values, Marcus had learned something powerful through all of this. That breaking your heart open is sometimes the only way to build something better from the pieces. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus received a letter at his office. It was handwritten, the envelope slightly worn as if it had traveled through many hands. He opened it carefully and began to read. "Dear Mr. Wellington, you don't know me, but I work at your store on Fifth Avenue. I heard about what you did for Mims Thompson at Riverside. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing us that someone up there actually cares. My manager used to speak to me the same way Derek spoke to Ms. Thompson. But after your changes, everything is different now. I feel seen, I feel respected. You gave me back my dignity. Sincerely, Maria Gonzalez." Marcus read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the weight of responsibility and the power of transformation. He decided it was time to visit Cashier again, not as the CEO making an inspection, but as a man who wanted to say thank you. He drove to Riverside on a quiet Thursday afternoon. The store was busy with the usual after-work crowd. Keisha stood at her register, her hands moving with practiced ease, scanning items and chatting warmly with a regular customer about her grandson's upcoming school play. Marcus watched from a distance, seeing not just an employee, but a woman who had stood firm when the world tried to crush her spirit. When her line cleared, Marcus approached. "Ms. Thompson, do you have a moment?" he asked gently. Keisha looked up and smiled. "Of course, Mr. Wellington." They walked to a quieter corner near the floral section, the scent of fresh roses filling the air between them. "I wanted to thank you," Marcus said, his voice sincere, "for being strong when I wasn't, for reminding me what this company is supposed to stand for." Keisha shook her head softly. "You didn't need reminding, sir. You just needed to see it with your own eyes." Marcus nodded, understanding the truth in her words. "I also wanted to tell you something," Marcus continued. "We're starting a new program. It's called the Keisha Thompson Leadership Initiative. We're going to train employees from within, help them become managers, leaders, people who understand what it means to treat others with respect because they've been on the other side." Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Wellington, I don't know what to say." Marcus smiled warmly. "You don't have to say anything. Your courage already said everything that needed to be said." That evening, Marcus drove to his mother's house. She lived in a modest home on the edge of town, surrounded by a garden she tended with the same care she'd once given to raising him alone. He found her in the kitchen, making her famous chicken soup, the smell filling the small house with comfort. "Marcus, baby, what brings you here on a Thursday?" she asked, pulling him into a hug. He sat at the old wooden table, the same one they'd eaten at when money was tight and hope was all they had. "Mama, I need to tell you something," he began. She sat across from him, her weathered hands folded on the table. He told her everything about Keisha, about Derek, about the moment his heart broke wide open, about the changes he'd made and the work still ahead. His mother listened quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm proud of you, son," she said softly. "Not because you're rich, not because you're successful, but because you remembered where you came from. And you used your power to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." Tears rolled down Marcus's cheeks. He didn't try to stop them. "I thought about you every day through this. Mama, I kept seeing you in Keisha's face, remembering how tired you were, how hard you worked, how people treated you like you were invisible." His mother squeezed his hand tighter. "Then you did right by me, baby. You made sure my struggle meant something." As Marcus drove home that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from success or wealth, but the kind that comes from knowing you've honored the people who made you. He thought about Keisha, about Maria, about every employee who'd ever been mistreated and stayed silent out of fear. He thought about his mother's hands, calloused from years of labor, and her heart, still tender despite everything. Wellington's market would continue to grow. Profits would rise and fall, stores would open and close, but one thing would remain constant: the commitment to treat every person with dignity. Marcus had learned the hardest lesson any leader can learn: that your legacy isn't measured in dollars, It's measured in the lives you touch and the hearts you protect. And as he pulled into his driveway, he whispered a quiet promise to himself, to his mother, and to every Keisha out there. Never again will I look away. The end.